And the reason why blockchain came was, okay, is there a way we can effectively provide a safe record keeping without relying on a central party that could potentially be either corrupt or make mistakes? The best way to do it is to register all at once in one piece. When I went back home and started very happy trying to explain that to the elders back home, they said, look, we've had that thing for millennia, right? Except that you guys are using machine to do it. But when a kid would be born or when we would record the land, we would bring 4 or 5 elders to actually provide a testimony that this land or that kid belonged to those people. And should 1 or 2 of the elders not be there, you still have 2 or 3. And so what blockchain does today is bring back the power of community as an engine of truth.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Sustainable Changemakers, the pioneering podcast on sustainability in the Arab world, broadcasting from Dubai. I'm Nadine Zidani, sustainability and climate activist, consultant and a coach on a mission to help people and businesses become a force for good. In today's episode, my guest is Mamadou Kwidjim Toure, the CEO and founder of Ubuntu Tribe. Mamadou is on a mission to democratize access to gold through technology, and by doing so, he is disrupting traditional investments. He is also the founder and chairman of Africa 2.0, a non-for-profit organization gathering a community of young leaders from Africa and the diaspora. Mamadou has more than 20 years of experience in finance and banking. He has been listed in the world top 30 most influential person in blockchain in 2020, and he is part of the World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. Mamadou, welcome.
Thank you. Hello. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you.
Great.
I'm very happy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you so much. So I really want to start the discussion, on focusing on Ubuntu. I remember, in 2021, I was attending the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week online. It was lockdown at that time. We're in the middle of the pandemic. And I was so surprised to see in the agenda a talk about Ubuntu. I am because we are. And I was so intrigued that I was like, okay, so I must, attend, this session and learn more about Ubuntu. So I really want to start this conversation by a very simple question. What's Ubuntu?
So Ubuntu, like we say back home, is actually a philosophy, a very human principle, of a guiding principle about how we should interact and what defines us as human. So Ubuntu, you find the word in Southern Africa, in South Africa, Zimbabwe, that generally says, I am because we are. But the reality is that Ubuntu actually also emanates and is used in different other regions of Africa. Like in Rwanda, for instance, they say Ubuntu, which represents men and women. In Swahili, they say Utu, which is the people, men and women again. And in, Lingala in the Congo Basin, they would say Abantu, which refers to the Bantus, which are the humans. So Ubuntu really means humanity, right? It is what defines the very essence of what makes us human. And by saying I am because we are, the very essence of what makes us human is this understanding and integration within us that we do not exist in isolation. We exist through, from, and with others, right? And hence the sense I am because we are. And even if you look deeper into the meaning of Ubuntu, I started really researching, and the etymology of the word is basically Ubu, which means Ubu or Aba, Ntu, which is Natu, so it's Aba Natu, or which means Aba means from. And Netu, if you look at the ancient Kemetic language, refers to the Neterus, right? The Neterus used to be the denomination for the ancient Egyptian gods, god of the moon, god of the sun, etc., and different gods reflecting nature. And Netu, Neterus, is what gives the word nature, natura. right? So Ubuntu, Abanetu means the ones from the gods, the divine creation of the gods. So really, when you really look at the essence of the power of this word, what it really carries is that constant reminder that we are a divine creation. And as such, our actions and our being needs to reflect that very essence of what makes us human and divine. And what is also very interesting with Ubuntu, as much as it's one of the most ancient words that you would see on the African continents, it's very universal, right? And as you know, Africa being the mother of mankind, but you find similar expressions in other parts of the world that also call upon that very essence of Ubuntu. So, for instance, in Mesoamerica, Central America, they would say Alakesh and Lakesh, which means I am you and you are me, right? Even in India, when they say namaste, that refers the divinity in me, salutes the divinity in you, is also that essential essence, I would say, a reminder of what defines us as human and what is our intrinsic connection as a divine creation, and therefore we cultivate the divinity, the divine within us. And as such, we acknowledge everything and everyone around us as divine as such. And therefore, I am because we are. That's the very essence of this philosophy that has guided many cultures in Africa, about that culture of hospitality, of solidarity, of common destiny, right? And as such, forcing and inviting us to always collaborate, cooperate in order to not only serve one another, but also the environment and the Mother Earth, who is our host, right? And that culture of I am because you are, but I am because everything is, right? And as such, I cannot see myself in isolation towards everything around me. And I need to kind of show respect and show also consideration for that very whole that is around me and that I'm part of and that is part of me.
That's really beautiful, and it's so universal,
It is universal, and it's a very powerful word. It's a very powerful philosophy that always brings us back to the very beginning, right? And to never forget that we are from the gods, as being said, and therefore let's cultivate our divine purpose and our divine essence.
And I really feel that we lost that, in our modern society.
And that's exactly the point, and that's why I make it a mission to even call, if indeed our ventures Ubuntu, the Ubuntu group, and to try and bring back to the center and to remind all of us as we went along the way, we lost the way partially, to never forget, right? So that we remain true to our core. And the current society today has more cultivated a stronger individualistic mindset, a stronger separation principle, a stronger differentiating principle. While and therefore, if you dissociate yourself from others, if you dissociate yourself from nature, then you're going against your own nature, right? And there's this expression that says, we are not nature defending ourselves. I mean, we're not defending nature. We are nature defending itself, right? And we tend to say, oh, let's protect nature. No, it's ourselves that we're protecting. And when you understand the essence of Ubuntu, you're not defending nature. You're defending yourself as part of this nature itself, right? And it's actually you that you're protecting from yourself in many ways. And it's applicable to every interactions among ourselves, but with everything that surrounds us. And when we really integrate that essential principle, then we can really construct and build a better world for tomorrow. The concept of climate consciousness or conscious capitalism is just about this integration and understanding that it's not necessarily about maximizing profit. It's about people, the planet, and profit for all. Because if you're successful in isolation, then you create a separation that leads to a certain conflict. And if we all rise, then that's where the whole essence and growth and abundance actually is ushered.
And listening to you, I want to link that to as well conscious leadership.
Yes.
Because if we, start working on ourselves, adopting, the Ubuntu philosophy, we can really, think about a new era of leaders.
Yes, I mean, so what is very interesting today, right, is that historically, leadership, the way we've looked at it was around the concept of the commander-in-chief, if I may, right? The concept of, in a very vertical understanding of indeed chain of command. And well, since COVID, I think it has helped people really understand that it's not really the world that we used to know that we're entering into. It's a whole new world that requires much more empathy, that requires much more sense of collective as to common destiny, right? So there is, and you've seen some strong leaders emerging, like the Prime Minister of New Zealand and other leaders who rose to the occasion and led from the heart. And the whole idea of leading from the heart is really in a way that as people do not work for you, they work with you, right? And they effectively are part of you, and your success is their success. And when you look at the historical nature, when you say conscious leadership, even if you look at the etymology again of the word conscious, conscious is from cum, which means with in Latin, and science. So it's basically leading with others in the knowledge of others and integrating them in the decisions that you make versus just deciding versus only you, right? And that's also the difference between power and authority, right? So if you lead with power, you lead on others. But if you lead with authority and empathy, you lead with others. And because you've integrated their constraints, then it's no longer leadership. It's it's guidance, and it's consensus towards a direction that you all embrace, not out of fear, but with love and consciousness of where you are heading. And I think when you look also the question of conscious leadership, it has emerged stronger and stronger, even in the way companies, have been integrating. If you look at the movement over the past 20 years in the corporate world, you've had different semantics, right? So it starts with you had corporate social responsibility, and then you have environmental, social, and governance, and now it's going more towards more like a company or an institution that is a citizen organization. And a citizen organization mean an organization that is conscious that it's part of a collective. And this terminology is also requires from the leaders evolving into this corporate environment to look at their company not as a center of profit, but as a part of a whole who acts in consciousness to all the stakeholders, right? And I've learned that also through my own personal experience. When I was with the World Bank at IFC, we of course had a strong requirement for development impact in everything we were doing. And you realize that ultimately many of the investments that I was involved with, most of the most successful ones were the ones who were taking a stakeholders approach versus a shareholders approach. As much as the shareholder approach was leading to some strong margins, it ended up being always very short term. And while you take a stakeholders approach, meaning, okay, for sure, you need to distribute dividends, but you also need to take into account the community. You need to take into account the health, the environment, your staff, and everything, and think systemic by creating the stakeholders approach where you maximize the return for all stakeholders. You end up being in an environment where all the stakeholders now conspire for your success. And therefore, your actual performance in the long term is much stronger, much more sustainable, and much more robust through the network system that you've put in place, that where everyone involved is actually working in that same direction, because your success depends on their success and their success depends on yours. And that's where you get again this whole I am because we are, right? And historically, if you look at the laws of economics and so on, I remember, when I was in business school, where you'd always look at the function of utility of a product for those who have done a bit of economics. I think today the function of utilities has shown its limit, right? And the best, if you look at the most successful ventures over the past, let's say, 20 years since the early 2000s or the late 90s, right? So if you think of a success like, Facebook in its own and its success, it does have its flaws, but it's a success in a sense that it brought back the essential need of social connection. That's why it was so successful. It brought back this quest for every human being to be connected with people around them and share from an emotional point of view first, right? If you think of Tesla with Elon Musk, it came from this place of, yes, I can build a car that is going to respect the environment. And because of what it does to the environment, then it had created a level of success by aligning everything around it, right? And I think, and even someone like Steve Jobs with Apple, and what his approach was, focus on ergonomy, put the human being at the center, and design a product where the human being is actually the one really using it and not the machine using the human. And by revising those things and calling upon that consciousness, then you, of course, de facto will trigger something that will create that level of success of adoption, because you go beyond solving a problem. You go by designing a solution that allows everyone to connect to it. So and we're seeing more and more, and that's the case, for instance, of the success of the blockchain industry, for instance, right? What is blockchain at the end of the day, right? Blockchain is the capacity to record information using different, let's say, computers on the web in one time. And when you think of it, it reminds me, and the reason why blockchain came was, okay, is there a way we can effectively provide a safe record keeping without relying on a central party that could potentially be either corrupt or make mistakes? The best way to do it is to register all at once in one piece. And when I went back home and started very happy trying to explain that to the elders back home, they said, look, we've had that thing for millennia, right? Except that you guys are using machine to do it. But when a kid would be born, or when we would record the land, we would bring 4 or 5 elders to actually provide a testimony that this land or that kid belonged to those people. And should 1 or 2 of the elders not be there, you still have 2 or 3. And so what blockchain does today is bring back the power of community as an engine of truth, right? Versus the centralized power as an engine of truth. Trust the collective to be that engine of truth. And that has been in most of the ancient cultures for a very long time. And in that sense, again, Ubuntu, I am because we are, is that I trust the collective to be the guardians of what is right. Right? And so the blockchain using cryptography is just the spiritual, the mathematical explanation or articulation of a very spiritual principle. right?
It's
And
very interesting because I've never heard that, about blockchain. We focus so much on, the technology and, cryptocurrencies and all of that, but not the spiritual aspect of blockchain.
this is what actually really seduced me into blockchain,
Yeah.
because it was, as much as people were seeing Bitcoin and big gains, what I was really seeing is how you can use science effectively to create a new form of society that is actually more reflective of the essence of humanity as a collective, right? And that's why there's so many applications for blockchain, right? For ID, different kind of certificates, and so many things that is a stamp of truth, right? Why? Because I rely on this collective to come, right? And the same way as you rely on blockchain, on decentralized finance, where you call upon the collective to be effectively come and fund one particular project, again, within that very essence of I am because we are.
Yeah.
Right?
And so why are we seeing it as a threat? Especially I would say, if we come back to finance, for instance, the traditional, I would say, financial system is still in a way seeing blockchain as a potential threat.
Yes, it is. I mean, look, there's it's the same way as one would say hardcore capitalism would see conscious capitalism as a threat, because it might generate to less, at least from a perception point of view, to less dividend return, while it doesn't, right? I think there's some preconceived ideas that might not be as accurate as they are. And if you remember, 15, 20 years ago, the oil industry would see all those climate activists as a threat. But, nothing can really stop an idea whose time has come.
Yeah.
And I think there is more and more now from the financial, after 20 years in finance, if I made the jump, it's because I saw something that was much better than what we were using before. And at the end of the day, it's the build it and they will come, right? And you can see now JP Morgan, BlackRock, and many of the big financial institutions getting into it. So of course, when you're in a position of power, you tend to kind of want to maintain that position until you realize that actually, first, that blockchain is not so bad, and second, is actually growing very fast. And if you want to effectively survive, you may want to jump into it, which is what they're doing now. The same way as the largest investors in renewable energy happen to be the historical oil and gas companies, right?
Yeah.
So
we are taking the leap now.
but that's also, consciousness also comes from a reality check, right? So, and I think what blockchain does, it brings that reality check to, there might be a better way to effectively get this done. Yeah. And again, what is powerful with blockchain, and we'll talk about crowdfunding. So we have a system back home. So with blockchain today, you have what you call decentralized finance, right? Where you can have different people come to fund a project and have full traceability and accounting all embedded around that project, right? Now, this is very similar to something we've been doing for centuries back home in Africa that we call tontine or stokveld, or susus in Ghana, stokveld in South Africa. So up to my adolescence, even when I was in Cameroon or in Paris, I remember my mother is an entrepreneur, right? So every Sunday of the month, either here or in Cameroon, then they would meet together with different women entrepreneurs, and then one would present their projects, and each of them would put a bit of money to fund them. To fund that project with a view of in 3-6 months the person repay. And this is very common standard all across Africa, actually. And you know what? The default rate is close to zero in those circles. Why? Because the collective, again, supersedes. There is such a peer pressure and there is such a sense of honor to pay back that you don't have that default rate. Right? And that's, again, when you say I am because we are, the power of the collective might create also a much more efficient system that serves the people.
Absolutely.
And blockchain today allows now that technology for people to be anywhere in the world, be able to fund a project, get full traceability, and also get their returns out of it through decentralized finance. And indeed, the same way, you don't need a central party anymore, but you're going back to trusting yourself and the community and empower each individual in the community to effectively deliver as much efficiency as possible. And it works. And it has always worked. It's just that technology is now catching up more with I would say spiritual or cultural essence of humans, right? And before, because you didn't have the tools, then you would have to rely on one central party. But you're dealing with a much more educated society, a much better connected society where access to information is also much more available. And therefore, people are therefore empowered and collectively can now put things together and solutions together that deliver a much more efficient and responsible society that really help each and every individual to really get equal access to opportunities without relying on what central party.
Yeah. I love, how you make the parallel, between, the technologies and, how fast actually it's coming to us right now. That we've basically coming back to our roots and who we are as humans.
That's exactly what I'm seeing in this whole trend. And that's why I love technology is that, and there's also, as you have those generation emerging, right? It is, coding and programming is ultimately creating a certain reality through a software, right? And with that, as a human, you create the reality that you feel is more aligned to your core. And that's what is happening now, right? And versus the time where, the IBM were more in one place and you have a bunch of computer geeks sitting to send the rocket to the moon, everybody has a computer. So everybody can say, look, this is who I am, this is what I want, how do I code it? And because they go back to who they are as humans and they have the possibility to code it, you're now getting more and more solutions, more and more apps that answer those needs, those human needs that are very intrinsic and that could be suppressed in many ways. But with the power of creativity, then you can do it. Think of ChatGPT, for instance, right?
That's what I had in mind actually right now.
Right?
I was like, what
so
about ChatGPT?
ChatGPT, what is, I've heard so many people say, oh, AI is dangerous, it's going to take all our jobs and so on. And I'm thinking, maybe not. Maybe not. Why? Because, okay, the work that you used to do in 4 days and you ask ChatGPT that pulls it in 5 minutes or 4 or 10 minutes. You can say, oh, now and I can think, oh, now I become useless. No, actually, you saved 3 days, right? And because you saved 3 days, what AI is doing is taking care of all the mechanical tasks that humans used to do, but it's also a way to free them, right? To free them from those mechanical tasks and go back to the very essence of their power, which is the power of creation, right? Which is the power of imagination. So if those mechanical who likes to do mechanical tasks? We're not robots, but we have to do it. We had to do it for a very long time because there were no robots. Think of the Ford Model T, right? You were in the chain and do this. Now, since robots do it, it frees time for you to actually go and explore the essence of your power. As a divine creator of your reality. That's where machines can't go. So instead of looking at it as a threat, there's always two ways to look at the glass. It can be half empty or half full. But I look at it as a way for all those things that required me to do, that was okay to do, but the main power of every human being is the capacity to create, the capacity to imagine and design new things. Let's go back to Malthus, the economist in the 19th century, right? There was this whole theory from him, he's a British economist, that said, oh, we're going to have a problem with going towards big famine because food production is actually going like this and population is going like this. So we're going to run out of food and we're all going to really perish and it's going to be a crisis and wars. Guess what? It didn't happen. Why? Because technology advancement led to such productivity that then at some point you could feed much more people from the same square mile or square kilometer of land, right? But because human beings came with new solutions, with the capacity to create and the potential to effectively design new solutions that are adapted. And in times of stress, that's also where the human power and potential gets unraveled, right? So I think, on the contrary, we're now entering in an era where our skills or our capacities are going to be heightened with the time that we're free to actually explore who we are as human and design solutions and create, right? Because this is what differentiates us from any other species or any machine, right? And, you were talking also about, technology and spirituality. Look, what is a computer? It's binary. It's a 0, 1, 0, 1. That's all it is, right? What is it inspired from? If you think yin yang, if you think positive, negative. So it's just a combination of two very, let's say, complementary things that you combine to create things that you would never imagine, right? What does it go and take from? Binary, zeros and ones. That's all it is. Right, and I think the yin yang concept, that's also what there is, and combining all that, then it's infinite creativity and potential that comes out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's listening to you, I feel like it's a huge shift that we are living right now. It's major.
Yeah. Like I said often, we're really entering a new golden age, and it is, and that's why I think. As we create our reality, as we apply this Ubuntu in us as a divine, we really at a crossroads and at an inflection point of our civilization with new technologies that really could usher a better future for all of us, right? And our role at Ubuntu Tribe, and that's why we tokenize gold, and that's why we want to bring gold and use technology to bring it in the hand of everyone. We want to make sure that anyone can get equal access to opportunity, regardless of wealth at birth or place of birth, so that they can take advantage of this new reality and this new world that is coming ahead of us, right? And for us, we really decided, okay, how do I address this question of responsible mineral extraction while giving its fair shares to those who are actually in the mines and who are generally get the short hand of the stick. That's where blockchain also was powerful for us. But we also brought other technologies that allow to extract gold with zero mercury, zero cyanide, so that you can protect the soil and increase at the same time the yield by 90%. Just by capturing more microparticles, right? But at the same time, you have full transparency using blockchain so that it shows that at each step of the logistic chain, people can see publicly, okay, where's the gold, how does it work, etc., through track and trace technology. And more importantly, because of we were very adamant to always stick to our very principle of I am because we are. What we've done was to set up a circular economy model into it, where 10% of all transaction fees could be redistributed to the mines and to the mining communities, so that they can build school and hospitals, and with a full transparent model, meaning wherever you transact somewhere in the world, somebody back in the mine get a piece of it to build a better future. And that I am because we are is that we're still interconnected, whether we've met or never met. And the system still nurture itself while the planet gets protected. And that's what the inflection point I was talking about, and the new world we're getting into is that consciousness of interdependence. When it's the butterfly effect at the end of the day, how do we create our own positive butterfly effect wherever we are, by understanding all the key drivers within any system or product that we put together? And I think the new conscious leadership and the new conscious capitalism will be to really integrate in our decisions, in the business models, solutions that really benefit everyone, and taking the time to build those solutions and leveraging on technologies that really allow not only the level of transparency, the level of also of decision and shared prosperity, regardless, right? And that's really where we're heading today.
I really like, what you're trying to build with Ubuntu Tribe, because you're really harnessing all the principles, we've been talking, about in the podcast: conscious capitalism, stakeholders engagements. You have an environmental impact, obviously, social impact, creating financial inclusion. So just for the sake of our audience, I really want to come back to the start actually of Ubuntu Tribe. So what's the purpose? Why did you start, in the first place, Ubuntu Tribe?
So I think the whole idea was, when I was in investment banking, and when I was, an executive with General Electric, one thing I realized is that many of the projects I was involved to, I always had this natural tendency to design and do financial engineering that was actually stakeholders focused versus shareholders focused. I would never always have the initial buy-in, but systematically over time, history and senior management would actually give me right, and the numbers would give me right. So somehow deep inside, I had that very understanding that my own professional success came from taking the time and applying the mindset in building a self-sustaining solution that benefits everyone. And as I did that, then I came to the conclusion, it's actually possible, right? And some of the companies I've invested in, some even listed on the New York Stock Exchange, right? And you would see, and for me, I was like, okay, why should we always have to do either or, right? Because yes, it might be the easy solution at first sight, but you end up always paying the price in the long run. Why don't we do all integrated perspective that works? And the Ubuntu philosophy is something I got very familiar with when I was in Southern Africa. And I was lucky and privileged also to be exposed to great leaders like, Graça Machel, Nelson Mandela, also Desmond Tutu and other leaders, which also inspired me further into Africa have something to bring to this, something more additional to bring in this civilization of universal, which is the very essence, right? And what I've really felt is, how do we bring back people and showing them that if you are true to your essence, if you serve the collective, then the collective serves you, right? Versus extracting for the collective to the point where sooner or later it backlashes, right? And so it was very important for me not to just start a business. What was more important was to start a movement, right? And start a movement that really embedded the true essence of human nature as a pilot for others down the road to potentially apply the same philosophy, right? Because if you're the only one doing Ubuntu and no one else does it, you're not having the impact you do have at some point. But if it's successful, then you will remind people that you actually can do good and do well, right? And my understanding was, then we have to go where the very beginning of the problem is, on money, right? And money is an energy, and for me, I found it quite unfair, to be frankly honest, the fact that, Africa could be sitting on, actually, I think, on 50% of the global gold deposit. And I would travel across all those countries, and I would go back to London or Paris or New York with those notes. Nobody would want them. And those currencies kept on depreciating over time. And at the same time, we were selling gold, and gold gained 500% over 20 years. And for me, I was like, this is unfair. How can we solve that problem? And as I dug further into it, I realized that actually the gold industry is not that clean. And we also need to change that. And then you come towards another problem, and then you realize that okay, if I tokenize gold, then yes, I'll be able to make it available to democratize access to gold using blockchain technology so that anyone with a mobile phone could buy, trade, and access gold, and which gives them a chance to access the global economy, right? While the currencies doesn't give them that chance, and have a savings instrument versus paper notes under their pillow, and a saving instrument that actually grows over time and can generate return. And without having to have a stockbroker in New York, because my grandmother can't do that, right? So, but everyone has a phone. So why don't we use that to start getting people out of the poverty trap?
Yeah.
Because, as we aim to this Ubuntu, to this conscious leadership, and to this conscious elevation and enlightenment, I realized that we need to first set people free, right? We need to, as long as people remain on the hamster wheel or into the rat race, like, they don't really have the time to pause and reflect, right? And where it becomes critical was, okay, how do you set people free? Then they need some form of passive income that moves them away from the worry of what they will eat tomorrow. Once you take that away from them, right, then they start first, it's like the Maslow pyramid at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? If you address the issues of security and so on, right, then you allow them
self-realization.
Yeah, exactly. You help them grow towards self-realization. So for me, Ubuntu Tribe was to use gold, and gold is a very powerful metal for a reason.
And very stable.
Right? And it used to be the reference until 1971 with Nixon. And across civilization and geographies, it had always had value, right? So, and there was a reason why all kings and queens, whether they were from Ashanti Kingdom or the Aztec or the Mayas or in China or in Europe, would look for gold. So, and those civilizations never talked to each other. So point was, okay, let's bring it back and let's give it and make sure everyone has a chance. Because once you give everyone a chance, that's where they can start realizing their human potential, right?
But you're tackling, a very big issue, when you look at Africa, being excluded from the financial system is a major issue nowadays.
It is a major issue, and for me, exclusion is something that needs to end, right? At the end of the day, think of this. I believe in two things. I believe that talent and genius is equally distributed on the planet, regardless of where you're born. What is not equally distributed is the opportunity to nurture it.
Yes.
Right? And when you think of Africa, who has 1.4 billion people, 60% of the population is under 25. And when you know that by 2035, there'll be 2 billion of them, that's a lot of wasted talent if you don't nurture it, right? And you can also see that when one has a chance, they go far, right?
Yes.
So why don't we make sure, whether it's in Africa or India or elsewhere, that those talents actually get nurtured and can come and contribute to make the world a better place? Imagine if you bring, let's say today, between key regions, you might have, I don't know, maybe less than maybe 1 billion people below the poverty line, right? Now, if you take the next level, let's say an additional 2 billion people that barely, make it, what would it be if you bring 3 billion brains to help solve the problems of the planet? It's massive. That's a lost opportunity at the moment.
Absolutely. I'm thinking just right now of, the climate crisis.
That's it, right? And that's why I'm like, we are wasting talent here, right? So if we actually had this brain power, right, to come and contribute and come with solutions and ideas, and now that we have internet, now that we have blockchain, now we have those social network, etc., and help and give them a chance to participate at global scale with their entrepreneurship, with their art creation, with their connection, etc., we would really, really, really have a different world. right? And not buyers too, right?
Yes.
That's the thing, because there's still, at the end of the day, 80% of the data centers and the computing power, etc., remain mostly in the Western world.
Yes.
Right? So it's not necessarily reflective either of what the planet is today, right? And culture is a gift. And, so much to learn in ancient wisdom that is not accessible. And that's why also you see more and more from my generation and the coming generation from the Western world going to look for answers in, the Eastern traditions, Eastern philosophies, the Latin American philosophies, and also now more and more the African ancient philosophies and values, right? Because there's a value crisis today in our current society. And the reason why there's a value crisis is very simple. If you make money your God, then you won't go anywhere because you will never have enough. And if that becomes your God, then it's okay to step on everyone else as long as you chase that one thing. But
because
if
it's your purpose.
because that's the thing. So unless we go back, right, to what defines us, then you will never really be at peace. And that's why there's a value crisis. That's why there's a leadership crisis. And the only way to solve it is let's go back to the source, right? And that's the invitation we're trying to give today. Let's go back to the source. Let's remember what defines us, because we came with a blueprint. And it is that very blueprint that has helped us survive all those crises. But if we forget that very essence of I am you, you are me, I am because you are, and the divinity in me salutes the divinity in you, then I don't care destroying you. Then we might lead to our own self-destruction, and with doing so, the whole planet and all species with it. So until we go back to understanding that very principle, and it's also the same way if you look at the school system, right? We are taught to, basically in a structure that prepares us to become a function in society versus a citizen in society, right? You go to school to learn a skill, to get a job, and at school you can't copy on your neighbor. You have to be, on your own. So you can't work. You're not allowed to work together. While the world today comes with the capacity to collaborate, and therefore it develops a mindset of competing versus collaborating. All that needs to be revised. But to start revising it, we need to get that Ubuntu in us and understand that it's actually much stronger when we work together. It's actually maybe not necessary to kind of just learn a skill, because in 4 years it will become irrelevant. It might be more important to be adaptable and create and be solutions oriented, right? And that's the whole thing about a value redefinition that goes back to the very essential values. Because if you're truthful to who you are and to what defines your species, then you nurture that, right? And that's really where I think we should be heading.
But it's a huge, we have to, you mentioned the school system, we have to completely deconstruct, what we've been building for the last decades to kind of really, come back to our roots and really embed, I would say, the Ubuntu philosophy in our lives.
One thing that was interesting was COVID.
Yes.
Right? I think the fact of pausing for so many months got people to reflect, right? Indeed. Suddenly they were off the hamster wheel or the rat race, and they had the time to pause and to say, okay, in which world am I? Why am I here?
What am I doing?
What am I doing? And there have been so many people who have started to question and to take different direction or readjust their life or focus of what really matter. Because ultimately, what needs, and that's why also, you have new systems that are being born on the side. And as you mentioned the banking and blockchain earlier, those new systems are still at embryo level, but they're growing. You have new forms of schools. Even the business schools are redefining the way of learning. Even, now you have a better model, which is, continuous apprenticeship and so on, where people are understanding that the world has changed and that there are new schools, and of course, they don't have prime time because they're not part of the establishment. But with people awakening more to this need of an alternative and questioning themselves, right? So, people tend to be afraid of crisis. Personally, I have to say crises help people awaken. And if I take my personal journey, like Rumi says, the wound is where the light gets inside of you, right? Enters you. So a crisis is an opportunity for change.
Absolutely.
Is an opportunity to question, address, and redirect yourself. And what I see coming is going to be many of them, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was a major financial crisis coming soon. We're dealing with some major climate dysfunction that may trigger some stuff that we didn't see coming, or we saw coming, but we didn't do anything strong or fast enough to address. And therefore, it might fast track that questioning, because, there's this adage that says, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? The point is that it is actually broken and people are patching, right? Until it won't be able to patch anymore, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, as you said, it's a health crisis, it's a financial crisis, it's a climate crisis. It's like the era of crisis.
Yeah, it's
basically.
we might be entering in a black swan scenario. And what I've been seeing over the past decade is patches here and there to make sure that it doesn't blow all at once, right? And a big attempt to effectively get people to awaken, when you see all the cops, etc. And then the next thing happens, there's a war, and then everything gets thrown away. But all that is a combination of small cracks that you patch, but at some point there might be so many cracks that the whole thing will require a full redefinition, right? Yeah. And as sad as it may be, if you think of the system we're in, is the legacy of the Second World War, right? With the UN, with the Bretton Woods institution, etc. It served its purpose, but it's also reaching its limits, 100%. Right? And it more and more we can sense that something has to give. And the beauty and what I see with the tech industry, it's a lot of young, passionate people who want a different world, and the only tool that they have is code, right? And this is essential to understand, because going on the street may not cut it. So instead of complaining about a system, we are building a new one, right? And as we build this new system, it's going to be building and they will come, right? At least.
It's better to be part of it.
Yes, exactly, right? And then people then have an alternative to choose, right? Yeah. But at least in the meantime, the new fundamentals and the basis of the world of tomorrow are actually being unraveling now in front of our eyes, although not at, I would say, in dashing light, but slowly and surely it's gaining momentum.
And, if I'm, one of someone listening right now to the podcast, and I'm like, oh my God, Mamadou is so inspiring. I really love what he's saying. And I'm in this phase of my life where, I want to elevate my consciousness. I want to be part of this new world. What would you advise someone to do right now?
This is a very good question. I'll start with one thing.
Yeah.
My own personal experience, right? People always ask me, oh, you've been a top 30, whatever, in blockchain, and you're putting this whole thing, and how did you learn about it, and how did you come up with the idea? Fine. Point is, I didn't go to a blockchain university, right? There was no university to learn blockchain. I studied for many years. I mean, when the first 2 years of starting this journey, this business, I was in Africa. I was somewhere in West Africa, not in the forest, if you may, and I had internet. So what I did, I went on internet, right? And I think that's the first thing, is that you need to take your curiosity where your mind wants to go, right? And that's how I started watching YouTube videos, doing research and understand, and that I saw the power of this thing. So if you're passionate enough about something, then start engaging on where you have a very powerful tool today that gives you that window to the world wherever you are. And by doing so, it might lead you to some communities, right? And that are linked to your centers of interest. And you have groups, whether it's on social media or on other places, where those topics are being engaged on, right? So social media has its flaws, but it also connects you to anyone in the world who might share the same passion as you or the same interest as you. So formulate your passion, formulate your interest, articulate and deep dive into the web, right? Get lost in it. Look at the bad, the not so great, and the extraordinary. And as you learn through trial and error, then also start interconnecting and looking for those groups who are actually as similar as you, looking for those particular elements. And suddenly you'll find your tribe, right? And finding your tribe is the most powerful thing that can get to you, because it's a very lonely road often until you get to that tribe. But once you found it, the quantum leap you make in understanding and in knowing and in connecting, and the way you feel empowered by, again, the strength and the might of this collective that share the same interest, that is actually working on new solutions. It doesn't have to be, an opinion group. Look as much as possible for those groups who actually do things about issues versus just talking about it. Because ultimately, the next generation has to be a generation of doers. We have a lot of people with opinions. We don't have enough of builders. If we build the world of tomorrow, join the builders, join the architects of the new earth, and engage with them, right? And there's also another important thing is that I did the personal work of self-transformation, right? And that for me was where also everything begins. You need to question yourself. You need to get lost in who you are to find yourself, right? And that we always underestimate that, but
and that's the hardest part of the journey.
That's the hardest part of the journey, and it was very simple. Like they say, since I was a child, I've always had this strong feeling within me that the world as it is could be improved, and that I felt having a role and a responsibility in making this world better. Since I could technically speak, I can remember that. Now, I did a lot of things. Some were successful, some not so successful, but all the time I learned, right? And more importantly, what was critical is on that journey, I realized that very simple things is that first I was smart. I wanted to change the world. And then I got wise. I decided to change myself. And, and that quote from Rumi is so powerful, because you can only bring a new world if there is a new you, right? And that for me was probably the most enlightening experience in accepting my flaws, accepting how I may not be aligned to the world I want to create, and how it required me to first question my value system, to first question traditional capitalism versus conscious capitalism, and how myself in the way I was engaging needed to also be the change I wanted to see. And I'm still a work in progress, right? So, and that work of self-transformation is as important as the work of building and constructing and connecting with the knowledge and the people who are building this new world, because you need to be somehow energetically and spiritually aligned on a frequency point of view to the frequency of what is coming, right? And that is essential in our opinion.
I would even say it's the most important.
It is it is the most important. And people think that meditation happens on a yoga mat. I don't think so, right? I mean, you do have meditate, but the real work of transformation is by really doing what people call the shadow work, which is understanding how you've been programmed, right? And we shouldn't reject the fact that society has programmed us, our parents programmed us, right? And that we somehow need to deprogram, because if you on that loop of the past, then all you can reproduce is a very similar picture of the past, right? But to kind of imprint new codes, you also need to reinvent yourself and understand what was working, what is not in you and outside, so that you can effectively deliver something that the new humanity will connect with.
It starts with us.
It starts with us,
and
yes.
I think that's the
Always,
most important,
always, yeah.
advice from the
podcast. It's a work from within out, right? It's always like that.
And
then
as
you have a look.
You said, it's never ending.
It's a never ending. We all work in progress
exactly,
until we,
it's not like, I've done my transformation.
And then and then halas, and no, it's actually
it doesn't work that way.
And that's also what's beautiful about it, right?
Yes.
We are constantly learning beings, right? Learning about ourselves, learning about the world, and giving back based on the synthesis that we've done from it.
So to end the podcast, if anyone want to learn more about Ubuntu and what you're doing as well, how they can reach out to you or get more information?
Sure, you can. Thank you for the question. You can visit our website, utribe.one, so utribe.one.
Okay.
And there you'll also have access to different social media platform, and you can click to follow us. And of course, we are always available to share, to learn from you, from everyone, and co-create this new earth together. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Mamadou.
Thank you.
Honestly,
It was my real pleasure. Thank you. I really appreciate
it. For hours.
Yes, I loved it, and thank you for the great questions, and for also really bringing up those questions that mainstream are often afraid to ask, and those questions that are actually the real questions that will really help things move forward. Because if we don't touch on what is at the border, then we don't push the limits, right? And change comes always from the fringe, and it's important to really and I've really felt honored by this opportunity to address perspectives that are the real perspective that will provide the keys to whomever is curious and willing to contribute to a better world for all of us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mamadou. That's my purpose, when I started the Sustainable Changemakers podcast. So I hope this episode inspired you. Thank you so much to my guest, Mamadou. It was such an insightful conversation. So please support the podcast. You can, like, share, and, put comments, on all the platforms. And if you want to contact me, you can reach out to me from my website, nadinezidani.com, and all the social media platforms. I will put all the links in the comments. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for the next episode.